So welcome to Agape. Agape meaning unconditional love. The love of God operating through the heart. Unconditional love. Love without judgment that cares for another's happiness with expecting nothing in return. Love that is about the love of self and the self-givingness of self to itself. Because that's God's love. The self-givingness of love to itself. That's what God is doing every moment of every day in its allness and individualized as us. We are giving ourselves love every day, every moment. That's what agape is about. I don't know if you feel it, but things are changing in the world. I don't know, all of a sudden it was like this last week, I started to feel like the 60s. I feel that there's a shift in consciousness happening. That the people of this country, the people of the world, are starting to understand that they no longer have to play small. That they don't wait on anyone to do anything for them. That they have the power within them to create the lives of their dreams. And so if you're on Facebook with me, you're going to see me starting to say some of those things because we're talking today about the decision to create, the decision to use your creative mind, and your creative mind is the mind of God. And there are no limitations to that mind. And no one can tell you what you need to create. Only you can, because you are the presence of God. We're going to talk about the decision to create our lives, the decision to use our creative mind. So in order to do that, we've got to clarify and clear out some things that may be holding us back from that process. And so when I think about the Declaration of Independence, one of the key lines in it, we have the right for the pursuit of happiness. Isn't it interesting that we have the right to the pursuit of happiness? And this is what our forefathers said was one of the inalienable rights of every person in the city. And then you hear this idea of the American dream. So I want to explore that. What is the American dream? Well, you have the freedom to pursue anything you want. But wait a second. Someone now says it's to own a home. It's to live in the suburbs. It's to have 2.2 children and be married. All of a sudden, the American dream became someone else's idea. And so then that idea becomes concrete in the mind of society that says that if you're not living that boxed view, you're not living the American dream. And so many times we don't go beyond that to question, is that truly my dream? Because I want to take it now from a bigger perspective than that. God does not have a plan for you. God does not have a plan for me. God does not have a plan for anything other than to express more of itself. Because when I was growing up, I was told, you must follow God's plan. God has a plan for you. You must listen for that plan. And then as I matured and I started using my own mind, I came up with the idea, there is no plan. I am making it up. The plan that I choose is the plan that makes me feel good, that is in my highest interest of expressing creativity. And what I've come to understand as I watch myself grow, as I watch myself shift my life, the more creative I am, the happier I am, the more joyful I am, the more fun it is to be with me. But when I get into a routine, that routine just keeps going and I lose my juice for life. But I want to say, when I'm in my routine of creating more, that routine feeds me. So I remember so clearly that there was a song on the Sound of Silence album of Simon and Garfunkel. And it had to do with Richard Cory. And it was about, I wish that I could be Richard Cory because he owned the factory. He had the fine cars. He had all the beautiful homes. He was living the American dream. And then the song went on, and last night, Richard Cory went home and pulled a bullet through his head. Because Richard Cory was living for the outward expression instead of the inner expression. And you see, habits that we build of doingness of that type of habit, that habit is about seeking from the outside our joy. And that may bring us in the world of the American dream that society may have set up, success. But inside, there's death. You can watch that on the faces of people who are caught up in the doingness and that are not living from the inside. They're almost like, it's funny how these movies about zombies come out. I've never understood them, but when I take them and I look at them from a spiritual perspective, to me a zombie is one who is living disconnected from their source. Excuse me, not living disconnected from their source, living disconnected from the truth. Because you're never unplugged from source. Does that make sense? You can't be, you're always source expressing. But knowing the truth of who you are, that you are the Christ, and the Christ power is within you right now. Most people do not want to identify, to even bring up ideas that are outside of the normal range of thinking. And they've built a mechanical mechanism within them that rejects new ideas. And so I've been reading a book by my friend Walter Starkey. And I'm going to be with Walter the end of this week in a retreat going over what he claims to be his final book. And in that book, he brings up this idea of the known versus the known. And that when we live from a place of knowing, we leave no room for the known to appear. So when we're so confident that we have a belief, and that belief is true, there's no room for anything else. Would you agree that that's the logical process? And that normally if someone else has a different belief, then there becomes a discussion which most likely ends in argument, which most likely means someone's trying to convince someone else of it. In religious science, we basically talk about one thing and one thing only. That there is only one God, and God is infinite, all-powerful, ever-knowing, always has been, always will be. There is only one. The concept of oneness is the only leap of faith we have to make. The leap of faith to be a religious science and to practice new thought, or truly to be in any spirituality, is to know God is all there is. If you buy that, everything else is a logical expression of that. So if you buy that, that's the truth. The belief in oneness is the one belief that dictates all that follows. If that's the case, then any other belief we make up. Marriage is good. That's a belief. Divorce is bad. That's a belief. Sickness is good. Sickness is bad. They're beliefs. Do you see what I'm getting at? Everything can be changed. Wealth means having $1 million. Wealth means having a nice warm cup of coffee. You see, they're all beliefs. They're all made up. And no one has the right belief for anyone else. Because one of the things that we talk about is that God came forth as each of us to be unique because there's no duplication in the universe. There are no two fingerprints that are alike. There's no two people that are alike. There's no two leaves that are alike. There is nothing that is alike in the universe. So I think the great thing that we must get over is this idea to try to be like Brad Pitt. Or ladies, to try to be like Demi Moore. Now, if you would like to make the minister happy afterwards, ladies, I would invite you to talk with a deep voice. Now, Tana, you do not have to talk with a deeper voice. Yours is right there. The thing that really comes to me is this idea of what is the greatest sin. And sin is simply a term, an archery term that means missing the mark. The greatest sin in my mind is the sin of self-satisfaction. Being content where we are at any time. And that, in turn, stops us from creating. It stops us from expansion. It stops us from thinking outside the box. And so it was real funny because as I've been reading recently, I'm reading about all these spiritual people, and they have found ways to think outside the box. Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, Walter Starkey, and others explored LSD. LSD has a greater penalty by the government, by law enforcement, than heroin. The reason it has a greater penalty is because your mind is free. You are so thinking beyond anything, and the greatest fear we have is that someone thinks beyond the control mechanisms that we put in place as a society. But the mystics of the East, they came up with the idea, meditate. Release your mind from the thoughts of daily living. And from within your mind, which is the infinite mind, which is the mind that is God, which is all-knowing, everywhere present, that knows all things, that is constantly becoming more. Now, put the question there. What became real clear to me as I was studying, and I studied Michael Beckwith's visioning process. And in Michael Beckwith's visioning process, as he teaches it, he talks about the first question, as you go into a meditative state, you ask questions and you listen for the answers. And in that, the first question that is said is, what is God, or what is Spirit's highest vision for my life in this way, or my this or that? And I could never buy into that. Something about that rang untrue for me. And then what hit me this week was the idea, why am I saying what is Spirit's highest vision? That's saying Spirit and I are separate. Well, if Spirit and I are one, then what is my highest vision for my life? Not a small box that I've created through my life, but what is the highest vision that is desiring to be birthed out of me, that's greater than what I've experienced to this form? Does that make sense? Who has a better vision for your life than you? Does anybody? Does anyone have your best interest at heart more than you do? Is there a power outside of you that is controlling your life? I guess there is, because no one's answering me. Remember what Terry McBride said yesterday? There's a give and a take when the speaker's answering. Is there anyone that has a greater interest in your love and happiness and joy than you?
No.
Who knows best for you?
I do.
Are you willing to accept that as your truth?
Yes.
Are you willing to accept that as your truth?
Yes.
God, yell at me, please. You know, I love being yelled at when it's positive. Across the house in my home, you'll hear, Lee, I love you. That's my dog.